Life's atypical, baby. Welcome to Atypical Podcast, where we talk about life's uncertainties, change, and unexpected twists, and find solutions together. Hi, and welcome to Atypical Podcast. I'm your host, Amie Archibald-Varley.
And I'm Jordan Varley. Welcome to the show.
Oh my God. So that was somewhat startling. I don't know. But you know what? It's actually funny. So that was the opposite of what we were talking about today, because normally you'd be like fluttering in the background. Okay, this is such a bad intro to what we're talking about. Okay, so today's discussion is, something that I think happens to a lot of people, or more often than not, maybe more often than we even think. And the topic of the day is ghosting. Not that kind of ghost, because that type of ghost I dig. Like, those are the ghosts that I'm like, yeah, I'm down with those types of ghosts.
You dig duppies?
Yes, as long as they don't like...
Or jumbies, as I've been told.
Yes, I dig all of those things. But I mean, I would rather that type of duppy than the dealing with like human duppies.
Yeah.
Okay, back to the whole topic.
That's fair, because one of them's real.
Very, very true. So I think, this is actually a funny part of the conversation. So have you ever asked your parents what ghosting is?
No, I didn't even know it was a thing until relatively recently.
What?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
I didn't know it was a thing. I didn't know it was a verb.
What?
Yeah, I didn't.
You're kidding.
I'm not. I thought I thought this was a relatively new term for an old thing people do to each other.
Well, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the definition of ghosting. Do you have like an idea? Like, what would you throw out there as ghosting is?
Suddenly cutting off contact with no explanation.
Right. That's pretty much what I would sum up ghosting to be as well. So it's essentially that, you cut off all forms of communication with whomever it is that you might have been, in a relationship with, whether it was at work, whether it was something more social, but it's essentially cutting off ties and no, there's no closure whatsoever. I actually did mention this to my mom. I was like, hey mom, do you know what ghosting is? And she pretty much was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. See? It's like it's like a generational term. Like, it's not a term that was used by millennials.
No, but the thing is, I think the idea behind
boomers or
ghosting,
Xers.
well, I think the idea behind ghosting isn't actually new. Like, I'm sure, let's go back into like, the 1600s or 1800s. I think what makes the mode of communication different is like back then, it's like, John Smith, I'm going to write you a letter, and that letter might take weeks to get, but that person would still get the letter. So maybe it took 3 weeks, but John Smith still sent the letter. But maybe what would happen is months and months would go by, and they'd be like, hey, where's John Smith? I didn't get that
they would
letter.
just assume
Ghosted, or they're dead.
That he died of TB or the plague.
I'm going to say it could be that.
It's like, well,
I'm just saying that
I shan't hear from Johnny today. It seems like he's got the whatever, I don't know.
He's got the plague.
He's got the plague.
but
Johnny's been playing with the rats again.
I'm just saying, like, I don't think it's a new phenomenon, and I think what has brought this more to the surface is the fact of technology, right? We are in a highly technological space, phone, like we walk around with mini computers, powerful computers on our persons. And I guess the form of communication has changed, right? Like, it's easier, like,
it's instantaneous now.
Here's a text. Siri, I hope Siri doesn't turn on, but it's like, Siri, send Jordan Varley a
Jenny
message.
didn't die of a hangnail on the way to send her.
Right. But like I was saying, all of this technology, it just makes it easier and more noticeable for you to be ghosted, right? So it's just like, okay, you have email, you have text messages, you have these different things, and then all of a sudden there's no communication. It's pretty apparent.
Right.
Yeah. So why do you think this has become such a common thing? Because again, like you said, you didn't even know about ghosting.
Well, I knew what the concept was. I didn't know it had a term until relatively recently.
Because it's the hip kids. You
sure.
do a whole thing about like.
I mean, I was never a hip
terms.
kid, even when I was a kid. So
I wasn't hip either, but
Yeah, you were more hip than me.
Okay.
So I mean, why is it so prevalent? You mean? Yeah. It's prevalent. I mean, there's probably many different explanations for it. It's prevalent because the sheer number of superficial relationships we have online is one way of one reason for it. I mean, if you've only ever met somebody online and you have never seen their face, or even if you've seen it in passing, like say from like a brief video chat here and there, and they're like somewhere far away, then there's very few consequences to just like cutting off communication. Right. So, and that's kind of goes along with like people feeling like they can say whatever they want online because of the anonymity component of it, right? It's in the same vein, just depersonalized. So it's easier psychologically to cut people off when you don't have that deep connection. Right. So there's that. And I think generally speaking, I think people are becoming less social and more anxious about relationships. And so we can get into it later if you want to talk about it, but like ghosting is like more of a symptom of an overall pattern of dealing with conflict or dealing with relationships and how they end and that kind of stuff, and conflict in relationships and stuff like that.
Well, I think one of the things that you kind of mentioned, it really kind of talks about like why we feel that we can even have this form of communication, right? Particularly in the sense of it being so abruptly, like you said, because we have all of these different, forms of talking to one another, and that, like for example, online, you can jump into an online space, say something untoward, and then just like peace out. Like I've just, stirred the fucking pot here. That ghosting can be relatively the same. You can start shit, stir up things, and then just like disappear. Or,
what's worse is that you do the opposite, is that you build a relationship with somebody.
Right.
And this has happened to people I've worked with.
It's happened to me. Okay, anyways.
Sorry, I was going to insert self-deprecating comment here, but anyway.
Please do.
Oh, yeah. Like, if you don't have any friends, you can't be ghosted. They're already all ghosts to me.
That's not true. Anyways, okay, go ahead. Oh, no.
So, but it has happened to people that I've worked with that, people start these relationships online. They invest in those relationships, and they become very meaningful for them. Often these people are very socially isolated. So these relationships become very, very meaningful, albeit superficial, because they don't have a lot of close relationships. The superficiality isn't really, like, they don't understand how superficial they are. Again, this huge investment of energy and emotional connection, and then the other party just cuts off ties.
Right.
Clearly, they didn't feel the same way, and they will cut it off not for any like perceived conflict. They'll just like, oh, everything's going great, boom. And then that's it. And then they'll be like heartbroken.
Yeah.
And so we can get into how people respond to it and whatever. So there are bad actors out there who are doing it because it's either amusing or because they're sadistic in some way. I mean, not all sadists want to like cut people into little pieces. Some people just revel in like people's suffering, right? And screwing people over and that feeling of power.
Well, I think, again, let's set the stage. So this happens not just to people, like this can happen in relationships.
Yeah.
And I think that's the place where we see it the most, like romantic relationships. It can happen at work or... What? I don't even know what that was. It can happen at work. And it also can happen with friendships. And I think, can you be serious? It can happen in friendships.
That's for the other podcast.
Oh my God. Okay. So let's talk about the classic case, right? So typically we see ghosting in relationships. Have you ever been ghosted in a relationship? Stop looking at me. You're such an ass. Have you ever been ghosted in a romantic relationship?
Have there been any?
Or have you ghosted? He did. I know he did.
What?
I'm waiting for the truth. Yes, you did.
Who did I ghost?
I can't remember your jubby's names.
Jubby's AA.
So?
Anyway, we met when I was 19, so there wasn't a lot of time before that.
Okay, but you told me there was somebody that you were dating and then you stopped talking to them. The fact that you can't remember it. See? That's what happens, right? They don't even know the damage that they cause.
I just never had a relation. Like, if you want, like, what's a relationship? Like a week or two? Like, we just didn't, like, it's not like I like ostracized them. I don't know. So, yes, I will say this, though. There are people I've ghosted, but they were, like, friends.
Ghosted people?
Yeah, but when I was, like, younger.
Oh.
And so, yeah, for sure. And we can get into why I don't do that anymore.
Well, we were talking about romantic relationships. So let's circle back to that. Have you ghosted anybody in a romantic relationship?
No, I will say no.
All right.
No. But again, the list is not long, and the most serious relationship I was ever in, I'm still currently in. So, if I do decide to ghost somebody, you'll be the last to know.
Oh my God. Then it'll be twice. So have I ever ghosted someone in a romantic relationship? Actually, no. Maybe that was the form of communication I should have taken. And I think we both know who I'm talking about here.
Yeah, see, that would require you to have been passive aggressive. And you are very not. You are very much not the former.
But my form of communication is not that. Like, I'd rather tell someone straight to their face. I'll say, like, I will straight up be like, I don't like you. I don't want anything to do with you. Leave me be.
But this is what I mean.
But I think that is fair. I think that's a perfect form. That is communication. That's me expressing
for sure.
my desires and making it very clear that I don't want anything to do with that individual anymore. And I think that's actually what should be done. So although
you're the Simon Cowell of relationships.
Okay. Well,
you're absolutely terrible.
Oh my God. I'm not terrible. I think
I'm
direct,
you're saying
right?
that to them.
I think that, at the end of the day, it's important that people know where you stand. And I understand, and we'll get into the science or, behind why people ghost people and talk about all of that. But I think that for me as a form of communication, I've always been direct. I've always just thought it's best in that other person's best interest, and them knowing that, like, if I do not like that person, that people know where I stand. I kind of the person that wears my shoulders on my shoulders on my feelings. Where's my feelings on my shoulders? And
you just got turned inside out.
And I just think I think that's fair. And I think when I think about it, and like, since we both haven't ghosted really anybody in a romantic standpoint, I have seen people who have, and it's just so messy. It's just like, I mean, yeah, I'm hearing the tea about it, but it is so messy.
Yeah, and I mean, we can get into like,
oh, I did this and this, and then I never spoke to that person again. It's like, why would you do that?
Right. And the thing is,
the aspect of, like, in the romantic relationship, when someone just cuts someone off, it's just, I think the biggest piece is, like, not getting closure, right? Like, you don't know. Like, I've seen stories online where people are like, I went on a date with this person. We were cordial. Everything was going great. We kissed. We made love, whatever. We fucked at the end of the night. And then I never heard from this person again. And it's like...
So, I mean, what you're referring to is, and I was kind of alluding to earlier, it's called ambiguous loss, right?
Yeah.
Often we use it in that term in cases where people physically go missing, but it's a similar feeling where you don't get closure, you don't have an explanation, you can't. So if you think about the way we construct our self and the concept of ourselves, it's often very narrative, right? Beginning, middle, end. We like stories with beginning, middle, end.
We like that.
And so if you end on a cliffhanger and you never get that ending, it drives people crazy because they don't know how to kind of tie it in a bow, take whatever they can from it and whatever. So we can give you some suggestions on, I mean, it's not going to make it easy, but it might help people move on.
Are there any, would you say that, I think there are, but I'd like to hear from you, but do you think there are any situations in, like, a romantic relationship where ghosting is appropriate?
Yeah, absolutely. just like any tool.
See, like I should have ghosted that person.
Yeah, I mean,
that person was a little bit like mentally unstable.
Yeah, if there's like
in terms of like
if there's a safety concern at all, for sure. Like if you are trying to flee a person who is being abusive or is very likely to be abusive or whatever,
right?
Whether it's verbally, whatever, just fucking leave, right? And just smoke bomb, right? Because that's the most dangerous time for especially women to leave relationships.
Yeah.
So yeah, by all means, ghost the hell out of somebody in that case. But outside of like extreme circumstances, and then we're talking kind of more run of the mill relationships, you know, have the hard conversation.
Yeah. Do you think length of time makes a difference? Like, let's say I've been dating this guy for 25 years. Okay, that's okay. No. Let's back that. That's called marriage. Let's
I was gonna say you got a lot of conversations to have there.
So let's say I've been dating this person for 5 years. Does 5 years matter versus 2 weeks versus a couple, like an engagement? Do you think time matters, or do you think ghosting as it stands doesn't matter what time it happens, it still is like painful? I feel like it still, I don't think time matters to me. But
the pain component is relative to the depth of the relationship, right? I mean, they generally correlate, but not always, right? In terms of length of relationship and the level of pain suffered when that relationship ends.
Right.
But that's not, but if it's a garbage relationship, then, So I think by and large, I think the crux of the matter is that ghosting speaks more about the person doing the ghosting than the person who has been ghosted. Right. And so as a rule, if you want to be a person who functions in society and it does pro-social activities, that means being conscious of other people's feelings, treating people like they're an end unto themselves rather than a means to your ends, all that stuff, then it's important in that, if you hold that as a schema of who you are as a person, that you go through the hard work of ending the relationship properly, both to let that other person get closure, but also so that you get into the habit of having these hard conversations, right? And so you don't feed the cycle of avoidance that often leads to ghosting. So
yeah, I think you're spot on, right? I think one of the things, and we might as well put the shoe on the other foot, like, why would someone ghost, or even taking the ghoster's perspective? And I think you touched on it. I think one of the biggest things that I learned about ghosting in terms of just reading about it and trying to understand the psychology behind it is there is that kind of avoidant behavior where, this person's conflict averse and they just don't like dealing with conflict. And it's just like, it is easier for that person to fully ghost versus to be like, hey, let's close this out with a conversation, because the conversation is more uncomfortable. I've also read that, again, from like the ghoster's perspective, sometimes it's just because they just don't care about relationships in the same way. They don't build relationships in the same way, and cutting someone off, not to say that it's cool, but it's just like, it is what it is, so to speak, right? And those people I find very troubling, because it's just like, if you find that it's okay in any circumstances in all your relationships to end them in this particular manner, it makes me like wonder, what do you do really late at night? At 3 o'clock in the morning, like,
do taxidermy, or
like, have you hit an animal?
Not, by the way, anybody who does taxidermy, I'm not calling you a psychopath. Just saying that. Anyway.
But yeah, it's just, if you feel that, I think it's more about like, if you think it's an acceptable form of communication, because I think that's the other piece. Because some people might, as ghosters, might know that ghosting's not the right thing to do. They just don't really know, or they haven't taught themselves, or they haven't allowed themselves to have hard conversations, that they feel that, that's the only way that they can deal with conflict. Where there are some people that are just like, I just don't care.
Right.
And that's those ones I'm kind of like, oh my God, like, what other aspects that you do not care about in terms of, building relationships? And that, I think, for me, is a little bit more questionable.
Well, I'd say if you're looking at, I don't know what the research specifically is on this, but just looking at kind of the broad spectrum of personalities and people that we have in our population. I mean, I think the vast majority of people who ghost are doing it out of a place of anxiety,
Right.
An attempt to regain control or maintain control. Often the people who ghost, from my understanding, have a pre-existing anxious attachment type,
Right.
rather than a secure attachment type. So people with insecure attachments, or anxious attachments, I should say, are much more likely to avoid. And so I'd say that's more common than kind of that.
So it's not always about malice. It's not like the person's just like,
I would say
person, and I'm like, doing this bad stuff to you.
no. I think it's most of it comes from like stuff that they're dealing with in terms of,
right.
And it could be any number of different things. It could be that I don't want to have a conflict. It could be any more than one thing at a time, because very few human behaviors are monocausal.
Right.
So it could be that they're avoiding the conflict. It could be that they're preempting hurt that they've suffered in the past, right? So I'm going to detach from you before you detach from me. That way I feel like I'm in control of the situation because other people have done that to me in the past. And certainly when we talked about friendships, that was kind of we're
going to get into friendships.
Right.
We're talking about romantic relationships right now.
Right.
Friendships are coming soon.
So we can get into that later. And then you get into like kind of more issues around empathy, right? And in the case of like anxious attachment and people kind of pulling away suddenly, that is much more likely to happen when people need to kind of keep themselves safe.
Right.
Right. And so
So, again, like I think one of the biggest takeaways that people might have about someone who might have ghosted them, particularly in a romantic relationship, is that they feel that it's like malice, right? And I agree with you. And as much as it pains me to say, I think that yes, a lot of it, like you said, has to do maybe with their attachment styles, has to do with anxiety, feeling overwhelmed or stressed, worried about what that how that other person might respond in relation to whatever might be happening. And that I'd say, what I don't know the fair estimate, but maybe 7 out of 10 times it's not about malice, it's about something else.
Yeah, I think the maxim, never attribute malice where ignorance will do.
We're talking about romance, so I wasn't too sure.
Yeah, they're removing themselves from the relationship, not out of ignorance necessarily, maybe ignorant of their anxiety, the level of anxiety, and what, like, maybe their emotions are pulling strings in their heads and they're maybe not making calls that they would otherwise make. That's often happens with people who aren't aware that they have an anxious attachment. They justify to themselves why this is a good move for them, and they're in self-preservation mode. When you feel scared or upset, we go into fight, flight, freeze mode, and that's very much in the freeze, flight domain. So, yeah, I mean, like, now, the consequence remains the same, right? So it helps to understand that it's not you, it's that other person, right? More than likely. But that doesn't make it much easier to deal with for the people who are being ghosted. But I think knowing that helps a bit. It takes the edge off, but I don't know if it will like be the thing that gets you through.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about like how to deal with if you've been ghosted after, but let's talk about friendships, because we're talking about relationships, friendships, workplaces. So we're on talking about friendships. Let's run this quick clip, because this is kind of what actually got me interested in talking about ghosting. It was actually someone who was talking about they were a friend. They had this friend for how many years, and this friend ghosted them. So let's take a look.
What would you do in this situation? My mum got diagnosed with leukemia and was given a couple of weeks to live unless starting aggressive chemo, which she's done. It's been the most awful thing to watch someone go through. I found that it's shown me who my true friends are, people who actually genuinely care about me, and the people who don't. They fully retract and they avoid you. I heard from a friend of mine, she said, "You've been really quiet lately, is everything okay?" And I really appreciate her noticing and reaching out. So I replied and I told her about my mum's situation. Now, I'm very cautious of how much I dump on someone. I never want to do too much that it overloads them, that they don't know how to deal with it. I'm very respectful and aware of other people. And I asked her how she is. And then I didn't hear anything back. Now, it said read, but, you know, sometimes I read it and I'm in the middle of something and I don't see it. So I thought, give her the benefit of the doubt. Weeks went by, if not months. Then I bumped into her at the shopping centre. I went to say hey. I went, and she did this, ducked, and pretended she didn't see me, and just walked off. And I know she saw me. I felt heartbroken. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe it's too much for her again, benefit of the doubt. Then I saw her again. I walked straight up to her because I thought, let's put it all aside and just be kind. Who knows what's going on in her life? Gave her a hug and said, how are you? And she was a bit like, and you could tell she was really uncomfortable. But I just acted normal. I didn't want her to feel bad or anything. She said, I meant to reply to you, but it's been a really bad year. And I was like, oh, what's been going on? And her husband was having someone at work, wasn't being nice to him or something. And I said, oh, no, that's terrible. I'm sorry to hear that. Is everything okay now? Yeah, it's all sorted now. And then I saw someone else and she just walked away. I felt like she just saw an opportunity to get out of there and escape. Can't help but feel hurt and abandoned. I do have abandonment issues. I really do make an effort to show up for people. When that happens to me, I just feel like, what's wrong with me? And I don't mean to be woe is me, but what do you think I should do? Do I reach out to this person and say, hey, what's going on? I've been going through the worst time of my life and I've been really struggling and you haven't been there for me at all, just wondering why? Or do I just let it go and just not have any hard feelings to see what happens? Or do I go, you bitch? No. What should I do? I really don't know.
All right. So that was kind of crazy. And that's kind of what got me to thinking about this. And then also the fact that, you know, I've been ghosted by someone I thought was a friend as well. And one of the things is, like, this person was describing in the video that it could be almost as painful as like a romantic partner. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, I mean, like, listen, romantic relationships have a few more nuances to them, but a friendship, if you're doing, like, there's still relationships, there's still connections that you have with other people. There's still relationships and things that are meaningful to you that you mourn when they leave and you grieve their loss, right? So yeah, and a lot of people can invest a lot in a friendship. So I can definitely see where she's coming from in that stance.
Yeah, I think the challenge always is like, again, with the whole aspect of ghosting. If you've known someone for like I think she said she knew her for like a large number of years, right? And I think that's really painful if someone's just like essentially she's like no form of communication. She's like, and it just leaves her wondering, work that way. The world doesn't work that way. It's just not like someone falls off the earth. And she knows that person's still alive and so I think it was like super unfair of people to be like, well, she should just stop messaging. Like, again, yes, I would say at some point she's got to recognize that it's done, right? And I think that's where she needs to do that work, right? Like, she's not going, and I think that's the aspect about ghosting. Like, you have to recognize that you are most likely not going to get closure.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to get an answer. You're not going to know why Janie stopped talking to you or why Tim's not your friend anymore. Like, if you've been ghosted, I'd say most likely you're not going to get that closure. And no matter how much she seeks or sends those messages, like, I think that's where she just has to come to terms with the fact that that person is no longer going to be in her life ever again. Almost like a death.
And that's it, right? It's very much like the grieving process. And so when you're grieving a loss and you know the cause of the loss, it's not easier. It is easier in some respects because then you can, again, we think in terms of narratives and how we come to terms with things. You know, there was a beginning, middle, and end, and there was a logical explanation for why somebody died, like it was some accident or something like that.
Right.
And then you're kind of, that's it. But if somebody just disappears and goes,
but you still see their Instagram.
Well, let's just say like the extreme case where somebody disappears and is dead, presumed dead. That's really hard because now your imagination, you just is just your brain is constantly trying to fill in those gaps, right?
Yeah.
And the same can be said for when a person ghosts you that you had a relationship with, that your brain is just trying to fill in the gaps, right? And being the creatures that we are with a negativity bias and being that we're also fairly egotistical beings, we combine those two things together, and we attribute the ghosting to ourselves 100% or more, or like around that realm. And it's usually a negative thing, right? Obviously, in that case, it would be a negative thing anyway. And so we take it on ourselves like, oh, what did I do wrong? And then you're thinking back through the whole relationship, particularly perhaps the months leading up to, what happened. And then you're doing all this post-mortem work, and despite all of that, you still come up with nothing, right? Or just suppositions, and you want something concrete. Like, nothing bugs humans more than like an unsolved mystery, right? This is why we tried to find the Titanic. This is why we do a lot of the things that we do. We go exploring, and we try to get answers to questions so that things make sense. And so we want our world to make sense. And then when something like this happens, it's random, seemingly, and it just leaves us with more questions than answers, and we don't like having unanswered questions.
Yeah, I'm going to put up another post here from another individual who talked about why she actually ghosted her friend. And she pretty much, to sum it up, she pretty much was saying like she was trying to set boundaries with this friend for a very, very long time. And for whatever reason, the friend was always like overstepping the boundaries or whatever the case may be. And again, this is just one person's word against another. Like I have no idea. But she was like, well, because she couldn't respect my boundaries, I had to ghost this person. And again, I kind of think to myself, I'm like, I still feel there's a way that could have been communicated. Like if someone's overstepping their boundaries, I still feel like as a friend that you could be like, hey, I've asked you respectfully to not do X, Y, and Z, or this makes me very uncomfortable, or this makes me anxious. And then at that point, that you're giving the person all of the danger signs that a friendship may be going to be over. But I think it's like, it's hard to know, obviously, if you've been ghosted. Well, it's over because you've been ghosted. But the thing is, you're like wondering, you're like, oh, well, what was it? And like, was it something I said? And I think sometimes it's maybe not.
and honestly, sometimes it's some people are just truly lacking in self-awareness. And so you combine that with, people wanting to hear the things that they want to hear. Yeah. So maybe you're subtly setting boundaries, or maybe not so subtly, but I mean, I've seen people be able to deny things that are staring them in the face. And I can get how that's frustrating for the person who wants to ghost, because they're like, listen, I don't have control. This person, I'm trying to get the message of this person, but for whatever reason, they're not picking up what I'm putting down. Yeah. I still think the hardest part that is being avoided is that final conversation, where it's like, listen, this is all the stuff I've done to get through to you. And while I've appreciated our friendship, this can't continue. And so you're not going to really hear from me anymore. This relationship is essentially, that conversation is brutally hard to have, but very essential to learn how to have those conversations, right? Learn how to tie a bow in your relationships, because if you're talking about setting boundaries, the ultimate boundary is, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. Right. And that's your prerogative as a human being, is if you don't have something to do with somebody, you're allowed to have that as a boundary, but communicate it.
Yeah. And I would actually say, and you can maybe say that I'm wrong or whatever the case may be, I actually don't think ghosting is boundary setting. Like, I would not say that it's not. They're the same thing.
I think it's like, the deliberate avoidance
100%.
Of setting a boundary.
If you, like, I think, again, like, there's lots of people, and boundary setting is this whole, like, new thing, right? Like, there's books on how to do it. There's a science behind it and all this kind of stuff. But again, at the end of the day, like, I think boundary setting is about communication, right? It's about saying, okay, this person's crossed my boundary. How do I communicate? And there's all sorts of different ways. And, like, you can tear somebody up 20 ways in Sunday by setting various different boundaries. And then when they cross them, being like, well, I kind of put this list of things out here, and time again, you've stepped over it, and now I'm just done.
Yeah, well, and I think that's important. I think if we want to live in a society where we are, we attempt to be compassionate and polite and treat each other as, again, ends unto them, as people as ends unto themselves, that approaching any relationship, any conversation like this with care and compassion is super important, right? Because that's the kind of treatment you'd want to receive if you were the person who's being on the receiving end of it, right? And so show respect to that person by having the hard conversation in a way that lets them know with compassion as best you can that this relationship's over. And that conversation's hard, and we're going to have that conversation throughout our lives. And honestly, practicing as it comes up in an organic way and being like, listen, I'm not going to shove this aside. I'm going to like face this head on. That's really the best way to overcome anxiety broadly, but it's also the best way to deal with relationships is to be clear and compassionate at the same time.
So back to the video that we showed at the top of the segment here. When is it time to reach out? When is it time to say it's done?
I think that's different for everybody in terms of like your tolerance for people's bullshit.
Do you think
right?
there's still, like, for example, on the ghoster's end, do you think there's always time to reach back? It's too late.
If you've ghosted somebody, you know, I'm always down for having a postmortem and being like, listen, this is why it ended. I mean, that's even harder to have now because the person who's been ghosted has all sorts of feelings about having been ghosted. So, I mean, prevention is better than a pound of cure, right? An ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure.
Very good. I'm glad you corrected because I was going to correct you.
Gotta get my idioms correct. Jeepers creepers.
So when is it time to let go in terms of friendships? When do we say, like, all right, it's done?
It's a very hard question to answer. I mean, I guess the general premise would be like, it's hard not to be too utilitarian about it, but it's like, listen, like this is supposed to be a reciprocal relationship. And that, you know, most relationships are reciprocal. There's a few in our lives that are mostly unidirectional. But
I find myself in a lot of unidirectional relationships. I don't know why. I think maybe it's as a nurse, I feel like I need to help everybody and I need to help people all the time. And I get myself in these like exhausting, and we'll talk about this on another episode where we're talking about like emotional vampires. Don't give me that look, Jordan. Where we'll talk
what are you talking about? Blah, blah, blah.
Where we'll talk about people who are just like energy zappers, but essentially just like, I find that I get in these, like, I put in more than what I usually get out.
Yeah.
And then that ends up being like, I end up feeling like very jaded at the end, or just being like, oh, why do I keep doing this to myself?
Yeah.
So for me, the time to let go is like, you ghosted me, I'm done. But that's just my personality style. I am very, again, just like, and I think maybe, again, we could probably go into, you know, like talking about attachment styles and like where that all came from. But for me, it's just like, if you don't see me as an important person in your life, spending my time, my energy, my resources to worry about the rest of the situation for the rest of my life, there's like 50,000 things I'm already doing. I can't add that to the pile. So once you're gone, you're gone. And then for me, again, maybe, and this is maybe something I have to work on, is like, if there ever was, and I don't expect one, but if there ever was like an apology or a reason for, like, I just don't have any time for the conversation anymore. It's like, okay, you clearly expressed how you felt. For me, I just don't even want to have the conversation. I'm cool with it now.
And relationships have to be mutual, right? And so we get into relationships because they bring something to our lives, right?
Not just money or sex.
Well, not just one thing.
Food or
right.
shelter.
They're usually like connection.
Right.
But anyway, connection is like human beings and social connection are at the base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So because we need those connections, some of us need more connections than others. Some of us don't need as many.
I don't think it's just you. I think there's a lot of people that feel that, and it's not about the amount of connections. It's about the depth.
Well, it's a quality, not quantity, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important to realize that it's okay to expect other people to bring something to the table, right? Like and relationships are going to ebb and flow. It's never going to be perfectly 50-50, and that's fine. But if it's 90-10, then you really got to question whether or not what we're doing here, right? If it's, 1 year it's 30-70, but the next year it's 60-40. Okay, well, the pendulum swung both ways now. Great. You know, you had a bad year. I needed you to lean on you. I needed your advice more. I needed you to pick up my kids and do all sorts of stuff like that. I needed you to be that person. And then the next year, once I got my stuff together, I'm going to reciprocate, right? That's the essence of a good mutual friendship. And unfortunately, that seems to be a dying art.
It certainly
in our
is.
current
Very
society.
sad.
And so it's easier for people to ghost because relationships are more superficial. They're less mutual and they're much more unidirectional, which makes it easier for people to kind of like, you've exhausted your utility to me. And so I no longer need to have connection with you at this time. Right? I call them foul weather friends.
Foul weather.
Right? And so they come along when shit goes wrong with them.
Right.
And they suck your resources out, and then once they feel stabilized
They're
and good,
vampires too.
you know, those are the friends where you're like, hey, you know, they call you up and you're like, hey man, how's you going? How are things with your wife? And they're like, yeah, you know, this and other thing, and you give them all the advice you can give them. You think through things with them. You're on the phone with them for like 3 or 4 hours. All right, cool. And then something happens in your life, you call them up. You're like, hey, how's it going? You're like, oh, it's good. Actually, things are going a little bit weird right now. This is the thing with my wife. And you're like, oh, man, that sucks. So there's this thing I wanted to tell you about this thing at work. And you're like,
yeah,
oh,
I'm sure
shit.
there's a lot of people that can empathize with
And
that,
so you're
right?
like,
Yeah.
you know, I invested hours talking to you about your problems. And now I get just this trite, just bullshit answer. And it's
That's
just
because
maddening.
they're in it for themselves, right?
Right.
Those types of friends. And again, I think that's a whole other episode where we can talk about emotional vampires, those people who essentially just come in to suck and drain you of all of your energy to kind of fill their own cup, and then like they give you like nothing back. But again,
and by the way, I do feel like ghosting those people.
so when is it time to let go? When is it that, you know, you're on the piece of board, the door that could hold you both,
Not according to James
he's
Cameron.
dragging you down. When is it time to let go?
Yeah, I think it's important to know that, like, listen, and what am I getting out of this? And have it in your mind what everybody's going to be a little bit different, right?
Well,
as you and I-
when do you let go?
Oh, if you ghost me,
Yeah.
when do I let go?
Yeah, when do you
Sorry,
let
I
go?
misconstrued the question. I mean, as soon as possible. Like,
It's
and
tricky.
that varies by person, right? Because you're going to have to go through the whole grieving process. It's probably never going to be a good feeling. You're going to reflect back on that relationship and be like hurt, angry, sad, all those combination of emotions. As with any form of grief, it gets better with time.
Right.
And I think it also, there are ways to kind of, just like with grief, there are ways of kind of moving that process on maybe a little bit more expeditiously.
Yeah.
Like
You got to find a new hobby.
yeah, if you just suppress it and you're just like push it deep down
Right.
and hope that it goes away, that doesn't work for any kinds of big emotions. And so, you know, like my favorite saying from my clients is like big feelings like shame, anger, self-loathing, all those big emotions, not bad emotions, just big emotions. They're like mushrooms. They grow best in the dark, right?
Right.
And so talking about them with other people, getting other people's perspectives, having other people tear you off of you, because of course your first impulse is going to self-blame.
Right.
And then you're going to go through the cycle of blaming that other person and then jump back to self-blame. I suspect that it'll, in your own head,
Go back and
I think
forth,
the
back and
split would be
forth.
70-30, you getting the blame for it
Right.
and searching for all the reasons you screwed up the relationship. So getting like other people's insights into that, being able to talk about your feelings as they come up, and then eventually you can do different types of therapies. Like you can try ACT therapy, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, where you just kind of like, okay, yeah, this is the way I feel, and it's okay to feel upset about the ambiguity of this loss. It's understandable. I can't do anything about it because I can't control the other person.
But I think that's a good instance in which you could be like, I cannot control them. Let them do that action. Let them ghost me. And now let me decide what I want to do with my what's my next step. And I think you're spot on. And again, I'm so lucky to have a husband who's a therapist. He hears all my crazy shit.
I don't therapize my wife though.
Let's circle back to the last part. So we talked about romantic relationships. We talked about friendships. Let's talk about workplaces. Let's talk about really quickly, because actually I'm hoping to have another guest come on who, anyways, had a really powerful LinkedIn post about ghosting within the workplace. And it's starting to happen more and more often. Ghosting within the hiring process, where we hear about like candidates either ghosting like the employers or employers ghosting candidates. What do you think is more common? So let's talk about ghosting in the hiring process. We are hearing about candidates ghosting employers and employees ghosting candidates. What do you think is more common?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I would suspect that it's probably employers ghosting candidates.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, because again,
I feel like it's a good split. I just feel,
yeah.
My
now that I'm
feelings
thinking
are
about
just,
it,
like,
it might be a split.
Particularly with seeing how like with the advent of technology, you could just literally like delete that email, be like, I'm just not responding back to that, whatever. And I think that I think this is a very interesting phenomenon. Particularly, like I'm a little cheesed off with like employers doing it, because it's just like you literally have your auto reply. We've all seen it. It's like, dear Amy, dear Jordan, thank you for whatever, but the competition was fierce. We did not select you. Send the email. It's not that hard.
Yeah,
Send
I mean,
the email
figure out your
like,
HR process.
I don't want you.
Yep. Figure out your HR process and make sure people get the wraparound.
There was this one.
I mean, you set the tone. You're more likely to get the workers to be like reciprocate, right? So it's not going to be perfect, but if as the employer, you're the one in a position, generally speaking, of power, because you have control over the means of production. So you're not to sound like Karl Marx or anything like that, but you do, and so it's your job, and you have all this infrastructure, and you have supposedly people who have the time on their hands that they can do it, I would hope. Finish the process and wrap around, right?
I've even like applied to jobs previously where, you know, they're just like, oh yeah, we're really, really slow. It takes so long to get back. And it's like months. Like I remember, my first nursing job, I think I applied, oh my God. I think I applied like in the summer, and I didn't hear back till like October. Do you remember?
Yeah, and that's actually fairly common too.
It was just like,
so if you apply for a job in June, July, and early August, because of the vacations and stuff that people are taking, you just get that pile of resumes gets kind of pushed off until the end of August, and then all of a sudden the calls start going out. So yeah, that's another dynamic altogether. But yeah, I mean, wrap around. I think the onus is more on the big multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar, whatever companies to do the wraparound, and for employees, do your best.
You know, I think do your best.
I'm much more on the side of employees.
Again, like I think for me, that would really set the tone for me in terms of that organization, right? Like if there was a company that I was applying to, and I was like, you know, gung ho. Let's say they even went as far as like interviewing me, whatever the case may be, and they never circled back to just to say no. Like that for me would be like a red flag about like this organization's values and how they treat their employees. So I just think that like just send the email.
In my experience, having applied to hospital-based social work positions, hospitals are really bad.
Healthcare is
like
always
my applications, not slow, not just slow, never. Like it is a black hole for, I don't know about other people.
Shame.
Like I have never applied to a single hospital that I can remember where I got the regret email.
Are you seriously?
Seriously, I can't remember one.
And shame. That is some shady shit right there.
So like, and so as a candidate, you're like,
hospitals need to do better. That's disgusting.
So you keep applying to positions, and like literally after a point, you're just like, this is just a lesson in futility. And it's not like they're making it super easy.
How dare you treat my husband that way? You wait till I come. Not coming to speak at your hospital.
But then like some rinky-dink organization will like wrap back around and be like, hey, sorry, you're not the candidate. And I'm like, at least I got something.
Think that again speaks to the industry, right? Like, wait till I start gritty nurse again. But I mean, like, I think that speaks to the industry in terms of the problems that are rife within healthcare, where it's just like, we just don't treat the people that are working with us the way that we would treat our patients and and families. And then sometimes, that's another gray area. But I think again, that just speaks to that type of environment. So maybe you haven't lost anything and you've probably saved yourself the grace of not working under that type of system, because the healthcare system, from not just, the internal structure in terms of, patient flow and stuff, needs to change. But again, just the managerial administration, that class is like that.
Yeah.
Needs an overhaul too.
And it sounds like it would be a good gritty nurse episode.
I will talk about it.
But it does make you feel like shit. So that is the ghosting component of it, to kind of tie a bow in that.
Like I said, speaks to the organization's values. And I think I've had some rejection letters that were actually like super nice. Like, I think like they've taken the time. Like, again, it's nice to have something personalized, especially if you've gone through like all of those various different stages. That it's just like, okay, yeah, unfortunately you were not selected, like, in future please apply again or whatever. And yes, that might be canned or whatever, but it's nice. I think I had one where I went through a much more rigorous process, and they took the time to be like, hey, apply again. Or I think there was actually one where I was rejected and I ended up working there because they called me back for another position. I was like, that's dope. And I think so. Is it ever acceptable to ghost in a professional context? No. That's my answer.
In which context, sorry?
From an employer standpoint.
Oh, no, for sure not.
From the employee standpoint?
I'm more inclined to be forgiving of employees.
Why?
Because of the way the economy is structured is you got to send out so many applications. And sometimes the processes can get so convoluted or demanding. Like, you have to jump through like 1,500, hoops to get the job. And eventually you're just like, I got to triage my time. I got like 13 other applications. I just don't have time to get back to you. I mean, if you can send an email, obviously send the email, or be like, sorry, this is not for me at the time. Click, bam, send.
Come on, do what I do when those like auto calls come in. Like, I know you are just like, I see someone at the door. Don't go to the door, Amy. Don't do it.
But I'm not ghosting them. We've never established context.
Where I'm kind of like, thank you for your services, but I'm not interested.
Don't ghost if you can help it. But if you got only $5 of attention and time, and that's going to cost you like 10 extra cents, then yeah, fine, whatever. Don't send the email. But it's not like they're going to anyway. I'm very pro-labor.
I see what you're saying here. All right. Wrapping it all up, putting it all together. Is there actually any, like, what do you think I think we kind of touched on the healthiest mechanisms for dealing with uncertainty and self-doubt when it comes to being ghosted, but maybe we can just reiterate some. And when I think about myself in the situation of being ghosted, I think some of the things that I kind of had to tell myself was like, it's not my fault. Again, ghosting speaks to more about the other person than it speaks to you. And again, just like, it's not even just like, maybe I'm better off without that person, but it's just like, you got to live your life, like, there's only so much, like, you can't control everything. You can't control other people. Like, if there's anything that you can't control, it's other people and how that they might respond or react or whatever the case may be. And all you can do is respond like how you can manage it. So for me, I was just kind of like, it hurt. I'm not going to lie. It hurts to be ghosted. And then you go through your stages of grief, anger, denial, blah, 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 back and forth. And then it gets to a point for where I'm just kind of like, I'm accepting of it. It's just like, all right, that person does not want to have a relationship with me. This is the form of communication they have chosen, and just to be okay with that, just to be like, all right, well, on to the next one, I guess.
Be gentle with
what
yourself.
else can you
Be
do?
gentle with yourself and know it takes
Yeah.
time for that to happen. It's not going to happen overnight. It can't even really be forced, but it gets easier over time, and that accepting it and kind of aiming your compass in the direction of like, listen, like, this is what it is.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do the best with whatever I have. What do they say? Not that Jedis don't condone revenge, but revenge is the best revenge is living well. So just move on with your life and, you know, redouble your efforts in other areas and take that time and energy that you were spending on that relationship and invest it
somewhere else,
in yourself or in somebody else, and then and try to.
And yeah, and again, like, there is a lot of uncertainty and feelings of like, what if, or what about this aspect? Did I do that? And I think you're right. Reinvest that energy into doing something that you're passionate about, or something that, you know, you maybe didn't know anything about, or just take that and redirect it. Because again, you can't control what someone else is doing or how someone else is feeling about you. So you just have to like take care of yourself. And I think people don't even see it as like, that is another form of like self-care, self-love that you should have. It's just like, not everyone is going to like you. Not everyone's going to be your friend. Not everyone's going to even, you know, do you well. Some people are going to do you dirty. And you have to be able to be like, okay, that says more about that other individual. How do I continue to better myself? How do I find that self-love? Because I think sometimes that's where it is. You're seeking something from someone, whether it's acceptance, whether it is friendship, whether it is you feel that, like, you know, you might be missing something. And I think like we need to, again, just like redirect that to like, what is it that I need? And it really shouldn't be invested in someone else. It should be invest that time and that energy and that love into yourself. Because I don't think we do that nearly enough, right? It's like, all right, maybe that date that you were going to go have with that your girlfriend or your friend or whoever, like, take that $15 and go do your hair. Well, okay, that's crazy. You ain't getting black people ain't getting their hair done for $15.
Listen, in this day and age,
okay, that's one drink at bubble tea or whatever. But like, you know, reinvest it into yourself, because $15 ain't gonna get me one braid in my hair.
No, it ain't gonna get me a haircut now either.
That's true. That's crazy. How do we resist the urge to create stories or blaming yourself when you're left with no information? How do you stop that? Come on, therapize me.
Talking to other people. I think, you know, it's hard when we're telling ourselves stories in our own head, because the stories make sense when they're in our own head. The mushrooms are growing in the dark, right? So it's like, this story makes sense. It fits with my schema, and often those are schemas that we have of ourselves can be pretty self-deprecating. And so, you know, it's a story that rings true, because if you're already kind of hard on yourself, then it's like, yeah, it could just, you know, make sense, right? Finding fault with yourself. So I think talking to other people are really much better judges of the situation in terms of like, no, you were like, yeah, they'll ask you questions like in your situation, like, here's the questions, right? Like, is there anything you did?
Okay, let's be honest. I remember saying, and I think it was like these two situations, you're kind of like, fuck him. And I'm like, he's kind of right.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, the biggest sin is that they didn't have the courage or whatever, the maturity to have the hard conversation. And so you can sit here beating yourself up all you want, but that is the final that's the final straw in terms of like, you know, who was right and who was wrong. Well, at the end of the day,
it don't matter. But
we could have had that final
conversation.
We could have had those final conversations and figured it out. And so, because we didn't, ultimately that part of the relationship, that fault lies with you.
Well, let's pivot to solutions. So, like, what would you say is, you know, some simple or respectful ways to end a conversation without ghosting, or end a relationship without ghosting?
Yeah, I think it's just I mean, it's never going to be easy. So you have to understand that, right?
And I think that like scripting is good too. Like
Yeah.
I think it's just like
Write it out beforehand.
Write it out. It's like, I mean, I'm that person who's like, I write my scathing email, then I'm like, all right, Jordan, read this. Let me throw it into ChatGPT, get them to like make this not so violent. But it's just like, yeah, you know, maybe you have to script a little bit. Maybe you have to think about in advance what you want to say or how you want to say it, or maybe you're too afraid to say it over the phone or whatever, but you craft an email or you send a text. But I think that if it's so difficult, there's got to be a different way than saying nothing.
I think if in doubt, err on the side of being more blunt. I mean, I'm not saying be mean, but be blunt, meaning because then you're going to be more straightforward, right? If you couch it in all sorts of euphemisms and kind of like equivocate, then the point's going to get lost, right? And also, if the person is kind of being willfully ignorant, it's going to just feed into that, right? Where they're just going to like take and pick and choose what they want to hear. So if you're just blunt and you just kind of say your piece and you're like, this is what it is. Like I've had relationships like that. And I mean, some of them are still technically relationships where I've been like, hey, listen, this is the case. This is the case. This is what happened. I'm sorry if I did this. Like, you want to have a chat about it? And that other person was like, no, everything's good. Don't worry about it. Blah, 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 blah. But you could tell that the relationship is now shifted, right? Well, at the end of the day, like they didn't ghost me. We still had a final conversation. They just weren't willing to kind of engage in the kind of work. And so the relationship is now, like I was telling you earlier, that person's no longer Mars in my orbit, right? They're being pushed out to Pluto. Right. And so there's still...
Pluto's not a planet.
Oh, it should be, though. Neil deGrasse Tyson. No, I'm joking. It shouldn't be a planet. But anyway, they're being pushed out to that orbit, right? Where I'm like, yes, we're still going to be cordial if we talk to each other, but we're not going to have a deep and meaningful relationship. Right. And then maybe that's okay.
Yeah, and I think, again, like in all of the different circumstances, so relationships, friendships, or at workplaces, I think there still is some way to get around having that difficult conversation. And again, we did mention that there are those safety concerns and those instances where ghosting might be appropriate, where like that's just how the situation has to be handled to ensure that person's safety. And that's a completely different conversation.
I should say one thing though, that's really important. So in debate, there's a straw man and a steel man, right? The straw man is when I come up with a version of your argument or your point of view that is very, very weak, so I can just push it over like a straw man, right? And then there's the steel man where I try to present to you your strongest position, right? And so if you're being intellectually honest and you're being rigorous, you try your best to present a steel man case for the other person's point of view. So if I'm going to talk to somebody about troubles we're having in a relationship or issues I'm having with them, I will try to steel man their position as best I can if that's applicable in the situation. So I'll be like, listen, in this situation, this is how I see it. This is how I feel like, this is what I feel like your position might be. But, you know, and given that, you know, I just don't feel like this is happening, right? And at least you're giving that person the benefit of the doubt, right? And if you're also kind of giving them the option of like modifying what you've said. Right. Like, this is my opinion of what I'm seeing.
Provide context.
Right. So what do you, and then if they want to provide updated information, some people just don't want to engage. Yeah. And so you're not going to get that deep conversation. And so you just have to accept that relationship maybe is getting pushed out to Jupiter, or, you know, it's not longer going to be like right there in your orbit.
Yeah. I'll throw up some examples of respectful ways to end a connection without ghosting. But final thoughts here. Is ghosting here to stay?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that, you know, it's more about like, how do we, because it's going to happen. Invariably, at some point in time, you're going to get ghosted. And it's more about like, how do you deal and how do you manage with that? Here's our 5 steps. No, there are no steps, right? I think it's, again, we're human beings. Life is going to throw you curveballs. There's going to be that uncertainty. It's just at the end of the day, like, how do we deal with it? How do we manage the fact that, you know, there are going to be people who are going to end relationships abruptly, and there won't be any closure. And again, I think that's where we have to just turn that lens inwards, accept that, you know, it feels like fucking awful, and being like, that hurt. I didn't like that. But then being like, all right, what's next?
Do your best. And so this is for certain people, the only type of connection they can get, the only community they can find is online. And so that is what it is. In terms of ghosting, you're more likely to get ghosted in that context because of the level of anonymity and the lack of proximity to some of the people that you're talking to. So it's important to kind of move forward with caution in those relationships and not overinvest, right? However, given that, I think it's still important that if you can have meaningful relationships with people who are physically present or can be physically present fairly easily, those relationships tend to be more meaningful, and it's harder to ghost somebody who lives within your community. As a species, we evolved in a context in which it was like under 100 people in our kind of hunter-gatherer tribes, and most of those people were related to us.
Yeah. And I always think to myself too, right? Like, that person who's ghosted you is just one person. I'm sure there are still many other people that enjoy your company, your time, your knowledge, your experience, and want you to be around. And those are the people that you should spend your time and attention to.
Cool quote of the day that goes with ghosting.
But
There are 8 billion people on the planet.
yeah.
And if somebody ghosts you, they just saved you the time that you could now invest in the other 7,999,999,999 people.
But you know what's even a better takeaway? To invest that into yourself. Yeah. So with that, I think that's a great place to stop. Thank you so much for having this conversation and sharing your therapy and insight with me. And thank you for taking the time to listen. And again, if you've been ghosted, feel free to reach out to myself or Jordan and leave us comments on SpeakPipe. And you could also email us at Atypical Podcast Amy@gmail.com, or send a message into SpeakPipe, which is much easier. It's kind of like Dear Abby. So you just kind of leave a voicemail and we'll get back to you in terms of questions related to ghosting. And then, let's have conversations. I think that's the biggest piece. Like, I'm always going to push for, at the end of the day, it's about having a conversation, whether it's a difficult one or not. I think it's so important as a species that we continue to have conversations, because we are seeing, like I said, this full breakdown in the way humanity is supposed to be. And I think it's really because people are not doing a very good job of communicating. So let's try to make that better by instead of being I'm not going to talk to this person, just be oh, it sucks. I'm going to do it. It sucks, but I'm going to do it. So stay tuned. Thanks for listening to Atypical Podcast with Amy and
Jordan.
Stay tuned for next week. Thanks so much.